You can't fake real. You know when you're like walking behind someone in a staircase, or I think speaking specifically as a guy, you're walking behind a girl, you don't want to stare at a specific area. And as I was walking, I didn't want to stare, so I was like looking left and looking right. I stopped for a second. I said, why am I trying so hard to force a behavior that I already know I'm not trying to do? So I said, you can't fake real. If I'm not trying to look at your behind, I'm not going to look at your behind. So I just stopped staring at the walls and looking down and just walked straight and went up the stairs. You don't have to overcompensate. So that's where I got this idea. And I was like, oh, you can't fake real. And I started seeing that in a lot of different aspects of life and understanding that from this little small instance, boom, you can't fake real. I extrapolated. If you know, you know. But that's where I was like, okay, you can't fake real. And really, you can't fake real kind of breaks it down into two things. I think the number one is the authentic version will always be more apparent than the imitation. The second kind of lesson you can grab from the term you can't fake real is who you are will authentically always bleed into everything you do. So if you're trying not to stare at somebody, you're probably not going to stare at them just because that's what you are authentically trying not to do. So you don't have to try to force it. And those two lessons, I want to start off with number one, which is the authentic version will always be more apparent than imitation. This is something that, again, I've realized off of just being a teenager and seeing people post certain lifestyles or try to appear a certain way, posting certain lifestyles on social media, right? They'll be like, oh, they might post this car, they might post going on this vacation or this and that, but in reality, you don't really have much going for you and you're just posting it just because you want to look good to others. And the funniest thing is whenever I see people I know post a certain thing and I look at it from a perspective of if I didn't know this person, I would be like, wow. But because I know this person, I know that it's very curated reality. But if you take someone who's genuinely living that lifestyle and someone who's genuinely in a good position or who's in a happy relationship and all that type of stuff, you see that they move a little differently in comparison to others who are not in that situation. That goes back to the point, right? The authentic version will always be more apparent than the imitation. It's like that one clip of Cat Williams saying, a Chrysler 300 looks like a Rolls Royce until a Rolls Royce actually pulls up. Then you're like, there's no way a Chrysler 300 looks like a Rolls Royce.
The fucked up part is they do look like a Phantom until a Phantom pull up. Then you just in that motherfucker.
They're completely different because once the real version appears, the imitation is so much more apparent. It's like, it's obvious. You don't even have to guess, right? And that is, again, if you're a true Christian versus a poser versus an imitator versus someone who's just putting Bible verses in their bio versus someone who is just posting, like having a Bible open, just posting pictures and wearing a cross versus maybe you might not wear a cross. Maybe you might not listen. This is actually the thing. Maybe you might not listen to all the Christian music in the world, or maybe you might not post about your faith, but that doesn't make you any less. In fact, I'm not going to say it makes you more real, but you might find more authentic versions that don't show the world every single aspect rather than the imitation to are trying to prove it, right? And actually the last example that just came to me is smart people. You know that guy, or you know that girl, or you know that person who sounds very smart in the way they talk to the average person. They might ramble and ramble and ramble and ramble, and they might make decent points, and they might talk a lot, and they might sound smart by using these big words, but you know they're not that smart. They just talk a lot, and they use high vocabulary to make them appear more intelligent. And I've also noticed these people always overcompensate for intelligence because they don't have it. they don't have it. So they always want to sound smarter than they are, and they always want to speak more than they have to. But the reality is, the true, authentic, the smartest people say what they need to say, simple words. They're not trying to make someone feel like they don't understand. They're just trying to get the point across because they truly understand it and they can explain it to anyone. If you can't explain something to somebody who's not at the exact level of intelligence, you're not as intelligent as you think, because you think you're so much better that you might use higher vocabulary, you might talk longer, and now this person can't understand because they're stupid now. The smartest people are able to take something that's a little complex because they understand it so well, they're able to break it down to explain it to somebody who doesn't. And that's kind of the last thing. When I think the authentic version will always be more apparent than the imitation. There are certain things that will just tell you that this person is authentic and this person is an imitation. And to break it apart, the second part of you can't fake real is who you are authentically will always bleed into everything you do. Who you are authentically will always bleed into everything you do. And this is not the best example, but this is the first example when I think about that comes to my mind. I'm like, if you're a nice person by heart, like in there, you're going to just be nice in everything you do. And maybe nice isn't the best example, but I'm going to say if you're a genuine person, right? Even when you realize it, you don't realize it, you're going to be genuine. And I want to use an example of leadership. If you're a leader, or if you're naturally a leader. If you're naturally a leader, more often than not, people see you as a leader without you having to say that you are a leader, because who you are authentically bleeds into everything you do. You just have that presence, or you just have that commanding, or whatever it encompasses being a leader. You have it. And you don't have to fake it. Not even that you don't have to fake it. It's just there. It's just there. Who you are authentically will bleed into everything you do. And this is the same for the good and the bad. If you are a mean person, or if you're like not a nice person, or you don't like being around people, let's say you're a sociopath or psychopath, you can try your best to fake it. You can try your best to appease people. You can try your best to laugh. You can try your best to use the best social strategies to appear more likable or more social. But deep, deep, deep down, that's not who you are. So no matter how hard you try to fake it, the authentic version of you will always bleed into everything you do. If you're lying about something, let's say you tell a fake story to somebody, you can try so hard and commit so much energy to keeping up this fake story. You can try and try and try and try and try. But eventually, with enough interrogation, with enough investigation, your story will crack. And it will bleed that you are a liar. That version, or the authentic version of who you are, will bleed into that situation. But the same way as you take the opposite. If you are true, you're telling the truth, and someone asks you about set scenario, they're like, okay, what were you doing here? I'm not doing this. And you're just telling the truth. You can ask a million questions, and you might have bias in not believing what the person says, but it's going to have a different effect, or it's just going to have a different feel, a different authentic feel, that when you're just telling the truth versus when you're lying. Because when you're lying, you're depensing a lot of energy. When you're telling the truth, you're just saying what happened. That's what happened. I mean, I don't have to expend so much energy into making up a fake story or thinking to an answer to your question, because the answer is already there. I walked here at this point, and that's what happened. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to tell you to curate a story. That's just what happened. So I think those are the two examples. Not two examples, but the two kind of main points of the authentic version will always be more apparent than the imitation, and who you are authentically will bleed into everything you do. So you can try very hard to act a certain way, and to both of these points, you can try very hard to act a certain way, but the reality is you can't fake real. And to wrap it up, biblical application, Jesus said this: And when the disciples asked him about, what was it, how do you tell a false prophet? You can go to Matthew chapter 7, verse 15 to 18, which is, I think this was a perfect verse for this video right here. This is the verse that I found. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased trees bear bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. There you go. So always remember, you either have to become that thing in reality or just accept who you are. At the end of the day, you can't fake real.